Hello again and welcome to Forum for a Better Understanding. 370 previous programs, but we've never had on this program Father Laurence FREEMAN, who comes to us all the way from, indirectly from Canada, but through the years from many other countries where he has been on mission with many, many other meditators and has been able to share the gift of Christian meditation with the world. Not just the Catholic or Christian world, but especially in interfaith settings. Father is a Benedictine monk and is the founder of the, director actually, of the World Community for Christian Meditation, which is now present in 100 countries. Father Laurence, it's great to have you back. I wonder if you want to tell us a little bit about what it's like coming back after maybe 15 years from being on this set, and also visiting once again the Central Valley.
Well, it's wonderful to be back here. Thank you very much. I think we were chatting about it today and concluded that probably 1986 was the first time that I came to the channel and spoke on the program, so it's really nice to be back. I think my third visit.
It's a privilege to have Father because he's here visiting as part of our Interfaith Scholar Weekend. That is a meeting we've had now for 17 years, and we bring in a scholar who represents the interests of major world religions. Father is a Roman Catholic priest, but does deal, as I said, very, very seriously with other religions, especially with Buddhism. In fact, one of his good friends, and I don't want to be a name dropper here, but the Dalai Lama is a good colleague of Father FREEMAN's, and recently in January of this year, Father and the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, were in India sharing, and we'll see clips of that later in our program. Father Laurence, could you begin by telling us a little bit about your own vocation as a Christian Catholic monk? Where did it start? Where has it evolved? How is it lived out today?
Well, it's always difficult to say how you got to be where you are, and but I think as a Benedictine monk, probably a very important element in my development was going to a Benedictine school, although I had no intention of becoming a monk until quite a few years after I'd left school and left university and was working in journalism and writing. And I had kept in touch with Father John Main, who was one of my teachers at school and became a spiritual teacher later in my life when he taught me meditation. And I remember very vividly, I was in my second year at university, and he spoke to me about meditation in a very light way, just sort of sprinkled the idea of it on my mind, and with no heavy sell or compulsion to meditate. But it made sense to me at the spiritual level. I knew that this was something very authentic and something I wanted to follow. Intellectually, it made no sense to me at all. I couldn't get my head around it, but I knew it was real. So that was, I suppose, the beginning of this, beginning of the vocation. And then I spent 6 months in the monastery with him, with a small group of laymen. And during that time, I began to meditate seriously and integrated it into my daily life and the routine of the monastery. And at the end of that 6 months, I thought, well, okay, that's it. I'm, okay with meditation. Now I'll go back to my
real life,
my career, my real life. And then I discovered to my horror that I had lost my sort of interest in the career plan that I had mapped out for myself and so on. I just couldn't work up much enthusiasm about it. On the other hand, I didn't want to become a monk at that stage. I thought I might do in 20 or 30 years' time when I was rich and famous, but I wanted to be rich and famous first. So anyway, I eventually struggled with that and decided I would become a monk. I would try anyway, and as soon as I made that decision, I felt a deep peace. And I think, like in any decision you take in life, you have ups and downs, and things never turn out exactly as you think they will, but it's a decision I've never regretted, and I was very fortunate to have John Main as my teacher on that path.
Where did it happen, and how did it evolve to work in interfaith meditation?
Well, it actually began, I suppose, in my own reading in the different religions. It always seemed to me important to know the beliefs and the scriptures and the outlook of people in different cultures and different religions. So I had done quite a lot of study in those fields. And I always found that the study of other faiths and traditions clarified my own faith and my own Christian identity more and more. But I suppose the very important moment was one day when we were living in Canada. By the way, I'm not only Canadian,
No.
I'm English, Canadian, and Irish.
I like the Irish part.
I have three nationalities.
Awesome.
Anyway, I was living in Canada, and John Main, Father John Main, had been invited by the Archbishop to welcome the Dalai Lama at an interfaith service at the cathedral. And he did so, and at that service, we had a half hour of meditation in silence. It was the first time the Dalai Lama had ever meditated in a place of Christian worship.
When was that?
That would have been about 1980.
Wow, wow.
And so when they were talking after the service, John Main and the Dalai Lama, Father John said to him, you know, we would be delighted if you could come up to our monastery. He said, we only have a small place at the moment, but you're welcome to come. And the Dalai Lama's secretary, which was his job, of course, intervened and said, no, I'm sorry, it would be impossible. His Holiness's schedule is too tight. But the Dalai Lama intervened and said, no, it will be possible. And so he came up and meditated with us at our midday prayer. We used to integrate the meditation, well, we still do, the meditation with the office and the Mass when we had Mass. So the Dalai Lama came for the midday prayer and meditation, and we stayed for lunch. And he and Father John had a long conversation. The Dalai Lama was really fascinated to meet Christian monks who were teaching meditation from their own tradition.
Wow.
And that was the beginning. And then some years after John Main died, I invited the Dalai Lama if he would lead the John Main seminar.
Oh my God.
And that was in 1995. And the Dalai Lama responded immediately, yes, I'll do it. What do you want me to talk about?
Wow.
So I was a little bit on the spot, but the Holy Spirit intervened quickly and gave me the idea of inviting him to comment on the Gospels.
Beautiful.
And he said, he looked at me and he said, well, I don't know much about the Gospels really. So I said, well, I could give you a little briefing on them. And what we could do is give you a number of texts, and you just comment on them from your perspective as a Buddhist teacher and Buddhist monk. So he said, okay, let's do it. It was a big risk.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a wonderful event. It was called The Good Heart, and it's become a book, actually, which is now in many, many languages, called The Good Heart. And I think it was a moment where I personally really understood what interreligious dialogue means. It means not just saying, this is what I believe, and then you tell me what you believe, and like a ping-pong match. It really, though, is about, while being rooted in your own faith and tradition and identity, having the courage to try to see reality from the other person's point of view. And I saw the Dalai Lama take that risk in public, looking at the world, looking at his own faith even, from the perspective of the Gospel. And it was beautiful, it was inspiring, and it opened my eyes really to what dialogue can mean.
We're going to see a clip later of His Holiness with Father Freeman, but right now I have questions about something local. We've invited you, our Interfaith Scholar Weekend committee, to come and share. You'll be speaking at the Islamic Cultural Center, you'll be speaking at Temple Beth Israel, you'll be celebrating Mass at my parish, the St. Paul Newman Center, and then you'll be over at University Presbyterian Church. What was it with your very tight, busy schedule that let you decide, Father, to fit in this very exceptional trip to Fresno?
California weather.
That'll do it.
I wish, but the weather I have here is exactly the same as the weather I left in London yesterday. No, well, I've always loved California. I have very good friends, Benita and Bob Langford, especially here in Fresno. And when I read the invitation and the description of this weekend, and the great tradition that it has generated, I thought it was very attractive, very worthwhile, and I was very honored to be invited.
Well, we are so glad you're here. And now we'll review for our viewers the agenda of the evening presentation and the Saturday workshop. On Friday night at the Islamic Center, your topic you've chosen is meditation into the common ground. What exactly might you be opening up for us?
Well, I think one of the great challenges and opportunities that we face in the modern world is for the different religions to relate to each other in new ways and in ways that will contribute to the resolution of the global crisis that we're facing. I think religions have a huge contribution to make, and religion often doesn't have a good reputation because it's often associated with fostering conflict and division and sectarianism. But I think at the heart of religion there is a power that transcends this sort of sectarianism. And I think we need to release that power. We need religions to enter into the major issues of our world, which are not only specifically religious, but our ecological crisis, our social crisis, the psychological crisis, I would say, that's affecting particularly the developed world, and so on. So all of these challenges need the participation of religiously minded people, grounded in their own traditions, and yet able to collaborate and learn from each other. So I think this is the purpose of dialogue. And dialogue depends on two things. One is recognizing that we are all human beings, that we all have a fundamental common nature, and therefore we have a common ground. And there are essential principles in all religions, such as non-violence and such as meditation.
Yep.
These are two of the really fundamental values that you find at the heart of all serious religions. However, the differences between us are also equally important. And it's very bad dialogue to try to create a kind of a false unity or uniformity. What you need is unity that respects the differences. And that would be a fantastic model for the whole world, for the politicians, for the not only for religious leaders, but for political and social leaders, educationalists, to show that different cultures, people holding radically different beliefs, can operate out of a common set of values. So that's why I think it's important. And I think meditation opens that common ground at an experiential level very quickly, as soon as you meditate with people of different beliefs. I have a... Shall I go on?
Please, for a moment, and then we'll take our break.
Okay. Well, I would just make... I've been thinking in recent years about the difference between faith and belief. Faith is best understood, I think, by the way we use it when we speak about a faithful friendship or a faithful marriage or being faithful to a promise. It's not just about having a set of beliefs, it's about a commitment, it's about personal gift of oneself to someone or something. Yep. So that's faith. And Jesus tells us, or tells many of the people he heals, it's your faith that has healed you. Now, beliefs are also important. Beliefs create the structure of values and a moral code that we live by and that enable us to live faithful lives. So I think we need both. We need faith and belief, but we need to see the distinction. Yeah. And religion that only operates on a belief system lacks spiritual, lacks soul, actually. It lacks spiritual energy. And so I think meditation is a universal spiritual practice. We find it in all the great religious traditions. We find it in Christianity. We find it in Buddhism. We find it in Judaism and Hinduism and so on, Islam. What meditation is pure faith. Yeah. It is strengthening the muscle of faith as we practice it. And this faith then enables us to live with different belief systems without condemning them, without trying to forcibly convert people or win the argument all the time. So I think it's possible for us to create or to envisage a community of faith global community of faith composed of people of different beliefs. That's the challenge.
And that's what you're committed to, and that's what we'll be discussing in the second half of this program. Stay tuned. We'll be back in 1 minute with Father Laurence Freeman as we continue this conversation.
KNXT TV is proud to say thank you to all its viewers who have given their support for over 25 years. And only through your support is KNXT able to provide spiritual and informative programming. Please remember KNXT in your long-term support through wills, bequests, trust, and plan giving. Your gift is important to the future of Catholic television. Help preserve the strength of KNXT's message based on the teachings of Christ. Keep KNXT in your future plans.
Hello again, and welcome to the second part of my conversation with Father Laurence Freeman. Father Laurence, you are telling us in the first part about the description of the opening evening talk. On Saturday all day at the Temple Beth Israel, your topic is the crisis of religion is the time for contemplation. That's presuming, I guess, that there is a crisis in religion, but we want to know what contemplation is. That's the answer. Can you unpack that for us, what you're going to do with us on Saturday?
Well, the crisis of religion is a little different in different cultures and different parts of the world. I travel quite a lot around our meditation community, so I have the opportunity to see how religion is unfolding in different parts of the world. And I would say Western Europe is a much less religious society than North America, but Asia is a very religious society still. Australia sees itself as a very secular society. So there are many differences. One has to be careful about being too simplistic about it. But I think in all parts of the world, religion has encountered the secular spirit. And this seems to be a very dominant force in the modern world. Now, secular is not a bad thing. Secular does not mean the enemy of religion. Now, there are religious people and religious leaders, I think, who think that secularism is the work of the devil, or it's really hostile to religion. But actually, secularism, I think properly understood, is a new way of organizing society in which religion has its role, can make its contribution, but there are many people who are not religious, or who choose to be religious in certain ways that are not always approved by religious orthodoxy. So this is the reality of the world we're living in. And I don't think in however many thousands of years we've been recording history, we've ever been able to replay the past. So we're not going to go back to where we were before. We have to understand where we are, what are the forces at work, and how do we see religion contributing most powerfully and most generously to the evolution of humanity. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity here for religion to engage with the secular world. This is going to mean that we have to let go of some of our old ways of thinking, some of our sectarianism or some of our closed minds. But this doesn't mean we're going to lose our identity. It doesn't mean we're going to create some, global religion. I don't think that's not going to happen anymore. Then you'll have one language that everybody speaks. Even English, different parts of the world where they say people speak English, sometimes you can't understand it anyway. So I think, so this is what I mean by the crisis of religion. It's how do we respond to this? Do we try to go back? Or do we allow, as I would say, the Holy Spirit to guide us into the future?
Let's play a clip right now, if we could, of the gathering when you were with the Dalai Lama in India on January 15th, 2013. Let's see what he said, and that may leave us a minute or two for you to comment on the Dalai Lama.
Global warming, the environment issue, beyond national boundary, beyond religious faith. Then the global economy, also beyond national boundary, beyond religious faith. So we entire 7 billion human beings, irrespective whether belongs to this continent or that continent, whether this belief, that belief, doesn't matter. Each individual's future depends on the rest of the world, rest of the community, humanity. So now, the rest of the humanity, no interest about accepting those religious people. You see, no concern about ethics. Then these problems, you see, happen. I always is mentioning India. Usually I describe historically Indians are guru. We are student of Indian guru. Basically, this country, very, very religious-minded nation. I think practically each Indian family, they have some sort of statues.
Technology,
or some other stuff.
technology works to a point, and I think what we want Father Laurence to do is help us appreciate now what really happened there in India, what was the goal of that wonderful meeting, but also we want to apologize for the fact that the transmission of the signal might not come off very well. It's a YouTube video. It's very hard to bring it to you today. Also, Father says, it was also hard right there when it was being made. But Father, tell us a little bit about that gathering and what you and the Dalai Lama were discussing.
Well, it was a continuation of dialogues we've had over many years now, and also it was an opportunity to discuss a new series of dialogues that we call Way of Peace that will continue next year. During those next 3-year dialogues, we'll be talking about religion and the secular, the place of religion in the modern world. So rather along the lines I was talking about just now. But on this occasion, just a few weeks ago, we decided to speak about personally and directly from our own beliefs and our own experience. I would speak about Jesus, who Jesus is for me, and he spoke about the Buddha, who the Buddha is for him and how that helps him in his journey. And then in the second half of the dialogue, we spoke about discipleship, how we see discipleship and the challenges of discipleship in the modern world. So that was the structure of the dialogue, and a very rich dialogue, actually. It
really was. I got to see the clips, which we are going to make available to you if you would be able to go to the site that we'll direct you to. But the thing about it was more the effort of Father Laurence and the Dalai Lama, who are friends, but also definitely representing different positions on many different fields. What would be one thing that you would say, Father Laurence, that after all these years of working with the Dalai Lama, you would still know that Christianity and Buddhism are definitely not the same religion, no matter how it is meaning to be dialoguing with the other? What would be something that you'd want us to remember is a difference that you and the Dalai Lama would both be insisting upon? It's a difference. It's an important difference in our faith.
Yes, and I think when you identify those differences, then you can go into those differences honestly, explore them, and then the mystery is, I think this is the mystery of the spirit actually, you find a common ground even in the differences. I've had moments, and it works the other way around. I've had dialogue moments where you feel, oh, we solved all the problems. We've really come to an expression of truth which will, hold for all time. But of course it doesn't. At the intellectual level, at the linguistic level, there's always something else to add or to question. And so that moment of insight or moment of truth passes, and you get back into questioning and dialogue and disagreement. But I think it also works the other way. When you explore the differences, you are led to the common ground. So, for example, if you take two differences between Buddhism and Christianity, which are very central, one is the understanding of God, and the other would be the understanding of Jesus or the Buddha. Well, the Buddhist does not believe in a personal God or a creator God. They have other explanations. However, if I were to ask a representative range of Christians who or what is God, and what does creator or creation mean, that you would get a lot of books written and a lot of long conversations. So if you look, for example, at the mystical writers in our Christian tradition, how they speak about God, still personal, but they use a language that actually brings you closer to the Buddhist idea, and I say closer, not the same, closer to the Buddhist idea of ultimate reality, or what they call dependent origination, where all things come out of some common ground. The language and the basic concepts begin to sort of resonate with each other. And I don't think there's ever a language that will bring them, or a computer program that's going to bring them together, but you can see that something of the same experience is being expressed in these two very different languages. And the same would be true, for example, of the Buddha and Jesus. My belief in Jesus, I expressed it in my book there, The Jesus, the Teacher Within, is that you can approach the mystery, the person of Jesus, at different stages. If I asked the Dalai Lama once, who is Jesus to you? And he replied very quickly, Jesus is a fully enlightened being, a bodhisattva, so a Buddha figure. That is everything he could say as a Buddhist. But of course...
Next week when we're back, Father Laurence will help us finish off this thought of the Dalai Lama, also his own understanding of the importance of interfaith dialogue. So please join us next week at the same time for another program with Father Laurence Freeman on interfaith meditation. God bless.